Opening day gets closer and closer. The New York Mets finally announced their opening day starter. They are playing tonight. Juan Soto already has a home run and a great defensive play. We're going to break it all down next on MetCast. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to MetCast. I am Ryan. If you're enjoying this content, I just ask you to like and subscribe. But I will say this. There is a ton of controversy for some reason today over why or why not Clay Holmes has been named the opening day starter. Now, let's not forget, our ace, Sean Manaea, is on the shelf. Otherwise, I presume that he would get the opening day start. Kodai Senga is still making his way back from injury. And just yesterday, we heard Joe DeMayo talk about on our podcast about how Clay Holmes showed up early to spring training. He was up there before everybody working. There's a reason why he went 3 innings in his first start when other starting pitchers typically go an inning or two. The folks over at SNY give us their opinions why and why not Clay Holmes starting opening day is a good idea. Let's react.
Amazing with the Mets payroll being what it is. You have to take a converted bullpen arm into a starter, and he's going to be the opening day starter. Hannah, do you like the decision?
Well, that's how far back are we going? I think I'm pretty well on the record as saying maybe they should have done a little more to help the rotation at some point this offseason, but obviously they didn't. I was sort of trying to come up with like a.
If you're going to say that, you better have another option. You can't just throw out there, oh, they would have done more. I mean, you're bringing up the payroll right off the bat, Sal Licata, but the payroll's that way because they're spending $50 million a year on Juan Soto, $30 million a year on Pete Alonso. That's $80 million right there. You brought back Sean Manaea, who pitched very good for you last year, gave him a sizable contract. Could you argue the Frankie Montas deal? I don't think anybody's going to debate that. Of course you can right now as it stands because he's injured. But if he comes back and pitches well, it'd be hard to fight that at the value, especially after we saw what everybody else was getting on the open market. But if you're going to say, I wish they would have done more in the bullpen, the starting rotation, or they should have, please provide a name.
Theory about opening day starters and whether or not it says more about the person they went with or the guys they didn't go with. In this case, it certainly says more about the state of the rotation with Manaea getting hurt, with Kodai Senga not quite being ready. It feels like it says a little bit more about Senga maybe than anybody else because I believe Tim Britton reported that he is expected to make a start in that first sort of turn through the rotation. So why they're not building him up a little bit more aggressively, I don't exactly know. All of which is to say Clay Holmes has done everything he could to earn that start so far this spring. In 9 innings, a little more than 9 innings, giving up no runs, 13 strikeouts, just 2 hits. So he's been good.
So 13K per 9 pretty much in spring training with no earned runs allowed. And I know it's spring training. You got to take everything with a grain of salt, but there's a reason why David Stearns picked him up for 3 years and converting him. 3 years. That's a lot to convert a relief pitcher unless you really believe in it.
Looked good. The changeup that he added looked really good. He had 16 changeups, I think, in his last start against the Nationals. He got like 6 whiffs, 8 swings on it. That's pretty good. So he's got the repertoire for it. He's showing you everything he can show you in spring training starts, which is certainly limited, to be seen to look viable as a starter. And given what's going on with the rest of the rotation, I don't know how much of a decision it was at this point. The decision was made earlier in the offseason when they didn't go for more actual starters.
So normally,
but you can't say that decision was made when they didn't go for more. They brought in 2 starters and they're both out. They lost Severino. They bring back Manaea. They bring in Frankie Montas. Both of them are injured. I mean, are people complaining that the Yankees didn't bring in enough because they lost Garrett Cole? They brought in 1 pitcher, Max Fried, and he is healthy for them. But outside of that, who's proven? Rondon stunk last year. Marcus Stroman stinks. I mean, that's just weird to say something like that. We got to be honest. I mean, if healthy, Mania is the opening day starter. You can't just anticipate that your ace is going to get hurt in spring training. Nobody ever anticipates that.
An opening day starter is like some sort of symbolic gesture within baseball.
Right.
You're the ace of the staff, or you're the longest tenured guy on the staff, and you tend to reward guys in that capacity. The Mets are kind of in a spot where something weird is going on with Kodai Senga, where they're trying to build him up. Maybe they want to make sure and maintain his rest is where it needs to be. And the guy who was the ace a year ago, Sean Manaea, is not available to go and pitch on opening day. So I think Carlos Mendoza and David Stern said, okay, who pitched the best out of spring training? It was Clay Holmes going away. Look, I'm not going to make a big deal of this. I remember when
David Peterson has been pitching pretty well too.
Carl Pavano, for goodness sakes, started opening day for the Yankees. McGill did it a couple of years ago for the Mets. It's not to say Clay Holmes is going to be their number one starter, but based upon his spring style, he earned it.
Yeah, and I like Clay Holmes a lot. This is not to knock him, obviously, but come on. It's opening day for a team that has World Series expectations. Talking about second highest payroll in baseball. You're going to...
You could say that. Go name me the 5 starters that pitched for the Los Angeles Dodgers last year in the World Series. It wasn't the Blake Snell who they have now. It wasn't the Tyler Glass now who was injured. It wasn't the Ohtani who couldn't pitch. It was a lot of guys that you never heard of. Let's be honest.
Start a converted bullpen arm who, to your point, had we're finding out if he could be a starter. And I think he's going to be fine and really doesn't matter other than it's symbolic for opening day. You want to set the tone. And Clay Holmes is making the start for the Mets. Let's make the call to the bullpen and welcome in John Hine. All right, Hine, Holmes has been impressive, as everybody mentioned here this spring. Have you seen enough to feel good about Clay Holmes as a starter overall?
Sal, no, I haven't. And no offense to Clay Holmes. I know that he's tearing it up in the spring, but you know what spring numbers mean. Really nothing. All that matters is when you get up and the 162 begins. And I think with Clay Holmes, I remember when he was a starter in his Pittsburgh days, it did not go well. Granted, it was a long time ago. They moved to the bullpen. He goes to the Yankees and he finds a pitch that gets everybody out, and he's a great reliever. But now he's coming back to the mound. They got to stretch him out. I think Clay Holmes will do a really good job the first time through the lineup, but the second time through the order, that's when the starters need to show up. And Clay Holmes, frankly, hasn't done that in a very long time. So I don't mind him getting the opening day start. I do think he's the best option that the Mets have at this point, but he's got to prove that he could go more than a few innings when he takes the mound. And that's easier said than done. And again, done everything right. Mendoza's psyched about him. Everybody likes what they see in Florida. Well, this is an annual spring right for the Mets. It seems like somebody gets hurt, and then McGill, I think, 3 of the last 4 springs, there was a surprise starter. So let's see how Clay Holmes does as a starter when the season counts. Right now, no offense, I don't count on the spring training.
The other thing, sadly, why it really doesn't matter that much anymore, because starters, especially early on, aren't going deep into games anyway. So if it were DeGrom or Scherzer or Verlander or Manaea, it's not like he's pitching much more than Clay Holmes probably will on opening day anyway.
And those are their opinions over there. It's a lot of doom and gloom, I feel, when there's so much positive happening around the New York Mets. We see the spring training game tonight. Soto's continuing to hit. Lindor's getting on base. Things are going in the right direction. And not only is this starting staff looking pretty damn good, having one of the lowest ERAs in all of baseball throughout spring training, take it as a grain of salt, as I always say, but look at the pitchers they have coming up that are going to be ready to make it to the big leagues, not only this year, but next year. You're probably going to have this year Brandon Sproat, potentially Noah McLean, maybe Jonah Tung next year. And don't forget, we have Christian Scott returning also next year. So a lot of young arms are coming through the farm system. And that's what's so exciting, because you're going to have money coming off the books. Maybe you bring in a big time starter or two. But if anybody knows anything about David Stearns, he does not pay pitchers who are in their 30s. He just doesn't do it. Think about it. His protege, Corbin Burns, was out there this offseason, a free agent from Baltimore, and the call wasn't even made. He ended up going to Arizona, not even returning to Baltimore. Some people were out there saying, well, Baltimore would have preference from Corbin Burns because he pitched there. Turns out that is just simply not the case. David Stearns does not believe in paying guys well into their 30s who are pitchers. Bats are clearly a different thing, obviously, because they paid Juan Soto, who's going to be almost 40 years old as that contract is aging. But but it's all about the pitching, the young pitching, getting that up. Maybe look for the New York Mets at the trade deadline to potentially add a starting pitcher, but I think that Brandon Sproat is going to get a crack fairly early in the season. I know they talked about him going down and getting reps down in AAA, but if there's a starter or two that's struggling, which I expect him to do, I'm not a big believer in Griffin Canning. I'm just not, but I could be wrong. Maybe the pitching lab turns him around, but odds are one or two of these guys are not going to pan out, and the Mets are going to go to him early because we are in the toughest division in baseball with the Phillies, with the Braves. We probably have 3 of the top 7 teams in baseball in our division, including ourselves. But that's what I got for you guys today. If you've been sticking around this long, make sure you smash that like button, turn that notification bell on, hit subscribe, and come back for all the latest New York Mets content. Thanks so much for sticking around. And as always, let's go Mets. Take care.